Georgia one day and they stopped him for speeding. And he gave the man $100 bill and the man said, I can't change this. He said, you keep it because I'm gonna come back through here in about another month and I'm gonna speed some more. So when he retired from boxing, he went into the Speakers Bureau and went down into Texas at a circus, and he was coming back across the country, and came into Georgia and connected on US 1. Now, I'm looking around here to see if there's anybody here old enough to know US 1 when it was just a two-lane highway. Because you remember that, how I said, yes, US 1 was just a two-lane highway, no interstates, no freeways, no nothing but 2 lanes from Key West, Florida to Miami. And he connected US 1 in Georgia, and he was coming up into North Carolina. He stopped at a diner in Apex to get some food. He and his valet, and they told him, we don't serve y'all in here. Go around to that little window around the back. And he said, I'm the heavyweight champion of the world. I don't go to no window around the back. And if you want us to serve you inward, you go around the back. He got mad, told the valet, let's go. And they got in the car, and the valet said he drove like a madman from Apex. And he encountered several, many curves. If any of you have ever traveled from Apex into Raleigh to Wake Forest, Youngsville, into Franklinton, on the back roads, there were several curves. And he negotiated a real devastating curve between Wake Forest and Youngsville. And then he came into Franklinton, down at the bottom, we call it Teasley Bottom, but it turned off at 1A, but that was the way you had to travel coming back in that day. And he negotiated all the curves all the way up to Howard Harris Road. And if you were to stop at Howard Harris Road and look forward, you could actually see the pole that he hit. When he was running 80 miles an hour, we took it out on the car, driving like a madman, and the road dipped. And when he came up from the dip, he was on the curb. And there was a truck in his lane, and he swerved to miss the truck. And that's when he hit that pole. Well, on that pole, every year, if you've gone down South Main Street for the last 4 or 5 days, you've probably seen a blue wreath on the pole. And I put a blue wreath on that pole every year on June the 10th to commemorate Jack's accident. Well, when the accident happened that night, my dad was at the barber shop around the corner, and they heard all the calamity. And they ran down to the accident. And because my dad was a boxing fanatic, he said, that's Jack Johnson. They sent for the White Funeral Home because the funeral homes did the ambulance service back in the 40s. I grew up driving ambulance when I got big enough to drive. And of course, the White Funeral Home didn't transport him because he was black. So they called for the colored funeral home. Just the language of that day. And they sent to the funeral home, and there was a man named Kenneth Mangrum who was on call at the funeral home because somebody had to man our phone 24 hours a day. They didn't have cell phones and pagers and all that kind of stuff. You had to get a call that there was a sickness or some reason for the ambulance to come out. And I have copies, I don't have a copy of that ambulance here with me, but there's a picture at the funeral home, the original funeral home in 1940. They moved there in 43, and I have a picture of that ambulance that actually transported Jack to the hospital. And when they took him out, they threw the valet out with minor injuries, but they had to cut Jack out of the car. And he was so mangled. He was still conscious, and he looked up and said, don't y'all worry about me, I'll be all right. And one of the boxing history books that I read said that as the ambulance sped south, transporting the mortally wounded body of Jack Johnson, the colored undertaker, who was my dad, wrote his epitaph. He drove too far, too fast, too long. And that was the story of Jack Johnson in Franklin. So a lot of the history books say he died in Raleigh. He was pronounced dead in Raleigh, as we say, DOA. And they shipped him back to Chicago, where he laid in an unmarked grave for years until Sylvester Stallone, the actor of the Rocky series, put a permanent tombstone on his grave. And he's buried with his mother and his sister. And I wrote a letter to President Barack Obama to get him pardoned. And I followed President Obama up until 30 minutes before President Donald Trump was inaugurated, hoping he would do it at the last moment, and he didn't. I still have the letter in my computer at home, at film home, but he didn't pardon him. And I was real disappointed because the governor of North Carolina at that time would not even entertain a highway sign in his honor, because he wasn't, first of all, he wasn't pardoned. He was still a criminal, and he was not a North Carolina native. And I've been working for the last 30 years trying to get some type of recognition for Jack Johnson at that accident site. And that's why I put a wreath on the pole every year. So this year, last year rather, in April, I think, I'm looking at it now, the news article came out May the 2nd. So this was somewhere toward the end of April. The Arbor Day Committee and my friend Judy McCon was the leader of the pack. And I really appreciate that, because I hold here a tree that was planted across from the site of the accident. And this thing right here is a little plaque that says, in remembrance of John A. Jack Johnson, first African American heavyweight champion of the world. And that's still there. I rode past it last year, and all the leaves were gone. I said, oh my God, the tree is dead. and not too much long after that, the leaves sprouted back out again. So the tree is thriving very well. It's a weeping willow tree is a very, very tough tree. And it will sustain itself in all kinds of weather conditions. And it's growing now. And every time I pass there, I look over there and I see that old Jack. Now that's the story of Jack Johnson and how we were affiliated with it. But this gentleman that came from Galveston, Texas, told me, Joe, you've got to come to Galveston to tell this story, because no one has ever told us the story of really what happened. And I'm the only living person that can tell the real story as it was passed on to me by my dad. And I've got all of the information. I even sent my son to Wake County to get a copy of his death certificate. And I took that to Galveston, and I don't have the pictures. I got it on my phone. I got about 100 pictures of those 3 days that I spent in Galveston celebrating Jack Johnson's birthday. And I was a keynote speaker at his birthday celebration. And that's a memory that I'll never, ever forget. Because for a little country boy from Franklinton, North Carolina, I was treated like royalty. There was a limousine that picked me up at the airport. Best hotel in the town. Anything that I thought I wanted, it was right there laid out in front of me. And the people were so receptive. The day of that celebration, I kind of got tired of a microphone being stuck in my face, a camera, a screen, a movie projector. I even had to do an interview at this museum that's on file now with the Convention Visitation Bureau of Galveston, Texas. And my friend sent me a copy of that whole interview, plus how they've edited it to show me and this story of Jack Johnson in Franklinton, North Carolina. So I'm standing here today to say to all of you that we have a storied history here in Franklinton. And I have an astute attachment to that history because it's a part of my history. And I pass it on to my son. And I impart this to anybody that's willing to listen, because this is really important to me. It says to me when my time stepped forward and planted a tree and erected a plaque in his honor, that I live in the best town in the world. I live in Franklinton, North Carolina.